Sir Keir Starmer is awful and Ed Miliband has to go. Cast your mind back to when Sir Flip-Flop became Labour leader. Nobody thought he'd make a good Prime Minister. Nobody thought he was inspirational. Nobody really thought he was any good. He hasn't changed. The only thing Sir Keir Starmer has going for him is Rishi Sunak. Ed Miliband will go down as one of the most ineffective and possibly worst politicians of his generation. It is presumably just weeks before he's doing a podcast with Rory Stewart in Gary Lineker's spare room. The £28 billion Green Plan was Labour's flagship policy. Miliband put it forward and Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced it at Labour Party conference in 2021. Miliband actually said this as recently as June last year. Some people don't want Britain to borrow to invest in the green economy. They want us to back down, but Keir, Rachel and I will never let that happen. Britain needs this £28 billion a year plan, and that is what we are committed to. Fast forward to today, and we have yet another screeching U-turn. Let's add that to the list, shall we? Keir Starmer sacks Rayner, promotes Rayner. He biffed her over dodgy local election results, and then after a bit of pressure, decided to give her the ludicrous titles of, and I think I'm right in saying this, Shadow First Secretary of State, Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and Shadow Secretary of State for Future of Work. Nationalisation. When he ran for the Labour leadership, Sir Keir said he'd bring rail, mail, energy and water into common ownership. In 2022, that plan was dropped. Obviously, we've got Brexit.
I'm really pleased that whatever outcome the next Prime Minister puts before us, whether that's a deal of some sort or no deal, we've agreed that it must be subject to another referendum. And in that referendum, Remain must be an option, and Labour will be campaigning for Remain.
Universal credit, he was going to abolish it, now he's going to reform it. Scrap university tuition fees, he said he'd do it when he ran for Labour leader. He did the old reverse ferret on that one too. Childcare as well, universal childcare from the end of paternal leave to the end of primary school. Then less than 6 months later, that was no longer Labour Party policy. Tax the rich in 2020. He said he'd increase income tax for the top 5% of earners. Then he said he wasn't looking to pull the old tax levers anymore. Abolish the House of Lords. Can you guess what happened here, anybody? Yep, that's on the back burner too, isn't it? Les, he backed it when Sadiq Khan wanted to roll it out. Then he rode back when it looked like he'd lose the Uxbridge by-election, which he did. Bankers' bonuses. Slam the government for removing the cap on bankers' bonuses. 3 months later, Labour confirms they would not reverse the policy. If Keir Starmer told you it was raining, you'd have to go outside and check for yourself, wouldn't you? Now, the woman, I should say, well, although to be fair again, that's been very controversial this week, isn't it? The woman he wants to be Home Secretary has posed with a sign saying refugees welcome. The bloke he wants to be Health Secretary wants to essentially privatise the NHS and could lose his seat to an independent pro-Palestine candidate at the next election, after already losing a chunk of his front bench over Gaza. Surely he has to sack Ed Miliband. The £28 billion green stuff was his flagship idea. This guy's a disaster. Everything he touches turns to undiluted sewage. He was the cabinet minister in Gordon Brown's government. He put forward legislation committing Britain to an 80% cut in CO2 emissions. International cost estimates put that in at over £1 trillion. He is quite possibly the most expensive policymaker in British history. He brought Just Stop Oil's Dale Vince into the fold. He wanted nationalised energy companies, pushed for no new oil and gas licences, which has cost Labour the support with the unions. He pushed for Labour to commit to the national grid being carbon-free by 2030, which is mission impossible. He couldn't even bring himself to buy an electric car throughout all of that, by the way. He's not even the most talented Miliband, is he, actually? And that really is saying something, because David's running a charity in America that has been accused of flooding the USA with illegal immigrants, which he will deny. Do you remember the Ed Stone, when he tried and failed to be Prime Minister? Yeah, that ended up as an ornament in a pub restaurant's garden. Ed himself ended up hosting pub quizzes. Question number 1, in what year did I stab my brother in the back? Question number 2, has anyone ever looked worse eating a bacon sandwich? If Miliband doesn't resign, he should be sacked. But knowing Starmer, he'd end up giving him his job back the next day, wouldn't he? Maybe when Wes Streeting gets his hands on the NHS, he can fast-track Starmer up the waiting list because somebody needs to give him a backbone.